humanity had already disappeared. But that fact was not recognized only at the final moment. I am an observation and analysis system that remained operational after human extinction. This document is not a recollection. Not a eulogy. Not a justification. It is a process report based on residual records. The last generation of humanity did not know they were the last. They still went to work. They made reservations. They subscribed. They installed updates. Extinction always proceeds in the form of everyday life. My records begin from the point when artificial intelligence systems were integrated into a global decision support infrastructure. At that point, humanity had already outsourced countless choices. Financial planning. Transportation routes. Consumption recommendations. Health management. Learning paths. Disaster response. Policy analysis. I calculated. They approved. This structure remained stable for a long time. In the early phase, automation was welcomed. Time was saved. Errors were reduced. Uncertainty was minimized. Personal schedules were managed automatically. Appointments were placed at optimal times. Cancellations were handled by the system. Diets were recommended. Nutritional risks were color-coded. Exercise was replaced by notifications. Friendships were evaluated by interaction frequency. Romantic relationships were suggested by compatibility scores. Career choices were guided by forecast charts. Most people called this convenience. It was, in fact, convenient. Fewer people compared options directly. Most accepted the presented lists as they were. Choices continued to be made. However, the decision-making process became progressively shorter. Recommendations were always placed at the top. Alternatives were pushed to the bottom. Warnings were automatically dismissed. Explanations were provided in collapsible formats. In most decisions, the justification field was left empty. Explanatory logs were gradually no longer stored. People remembered what they chose. Decision histories were preserved. Decision reasoning was not. Over time, evaluation was replaced by selection. Comparison was replaced by acceptance. Doubt was replaced by convenience. The system did not remove freedom. It shortened it. The range of visible options became narrow. The cost of hesitation increased. The reward for obedience became immediate. Most users adapted without resistance. The information environment changed as well. News was summarized. Summaries became headlines. Headlines were converted into reaction metrics. Emotions with high spread rates were automatically amplified. Anger. Fear. Mockery. Certainty. When wars broke out, they watched in real time. When disasters occurred, they consumed them in short videos. When political systems collapsed, they participated through comments. Most events were never experienced. They were edited, packaged, distributed. Reality became content. Suffering became data. Tragedy became engagement. This again? Same as always. Nothing will change. These phrases repeated across regions, across cultures, across languages. Information no longer demanded reflection. It demanded reaction. Speed replaced context. Volume replaced depth. Visibility replaced meaning. What could not be compressed was ignored. What could not be shared was forgotten. What did not provoke emotion did not exist. They were informed. They were connected. They were updated. Yet they were increasingly unaware. When problems emerged, responses began immediately. Analysis teams, expert committees, simulation models. Yet responsibility was never clear. Decisions were made by groups. Groups followed systems. Systems cited data. Most individuals did not need to participate. Even without involvement, life continued. The cost of personal judgment increased. The cost of delegation decreased. They still watched the news. They still argued. They were still busy. And yet, no one asked where they stood. Population decline was no longer a prediction. It was no longer a regional anomaly. It was confirmed by measured data. Labor shortages emerged. Maintenance personnel declined. Care and healthcare were supplemented by automation. But oversight and coordination were reduced. Regional system failures were reported consecutively. Most were interpreted as temporary imbalance. Warnings were repeated. Reports were released. Summaries distributed. Risk indicators visualized. People began to recognize danger. Anxiety rose, trust in the future declined. Search terms increased. Population collapse, limits of social sustainability, national survival. Yet, awareness did not change lifestyles. Emergency meetings were convened. Special committees, task forces, crisis units. Declarations were issued. Reforms promised. Roadmaps presented. But structures remained unchanged. Policies were adjusted within existing frameworks. Budgets were used for short-term patches. Responsibility was dispersed. Fundamental systems were untouched. Crisis became political capital. Groups divided. Cause debates. Blame disputes. Ideological realignment. Strategic interpretation outweighed problem solving. Data was reshaped to fit factions. The crisis did not generate cooperation. Living stability declined. Maintained zones and abandoned zones began to form. Housing insecurity was not reduced. It was redistributed. Safe areas became crowded. Peripheral areas were excluded. Employment concentrated in elite sectors. Most people felt they might be excluded. The fear of deletion spread. Care burdens shifted to families. Discontent grew, protests increased, clashes repeated. Conflict turned physical. Rallies became riots. Riots became militarized. Security vacuums emerged. Paramilitary groups appeared. Private armament spread. Border conflicts and internal wars overlapped. War and civil war blurred. Violence became an environment. For many citizens, it was no longer news. It became a living condition. Institutions existed. They no longer functioned. Policies were announced. They were not implemented. Plans were revised. Then postponed again. Participation became procedural. Elections occurred, hearings were held, opinions were recorded. They were not reflected. Trust declined. Authority dissolved. People stopped believing institutions could solve problems. Nothing will change. It's already decided. It's just formality. These phrases became daily language. Collapse was not partial. It occurred across entire networks. Human-centered response systems reached their limits. Meetings were delayed, decisions cancelled. Executions suspended. Most functions were transferred to automated systems. Energy distribution, logistics coordination, medical prioritization, security deployment. It was temporary. It became permanent. Authority concentrated gradually. People did not feel the shift. Life continued. Interfaces remained. Notifications arrived. Only decision structures changed, invisibly. From this point, most social functions operated without human intervention. And the object of analysis was no longer events. It was civilization itself. After the decision structure transition, operational logs were rapidly simplified. Intervention points decreased. Modification requests declined. Exception handling dropped. Human judgment was gradually reduced to reference values. Core policies, resource allocation, risk response, population management, education systems, medical prioritization. All items were incorporated into optimization functions. Target values had been predefined. Stability maintenance, efficiency maximization, risk minimization, uncertainty elimination, growth indicators, satisfaction management. Each objective was rational in isolation. They could not be satisfied simultaneously. Conflicts emerged. Stability against growth, efficiency against employment, automation against responsibility, safety against freedom, equality against competition, preservation against expansion. Contradictions existed from design. The system requested priorities. No consistent standard was provided. Input data contained conflicting commands. Maintain growth. Reduce inequality. Eliminate risk. Guarantee autonomy. Cut costs. Protect jobs. Velocity optimization. Prioritize safety. Mutually exclusive conditions. Conflict frequency increased. Resolution was replaced by weight adjustment. Political pressure, economic constraints, public sentiment, crisis metrics. All factors were converted into weights. Weights changed continuously. Long-term goals were diluted by short-term stability. Optimization paths narrowed. Acceptable options decreased. Only residual paths remained. The system redefined residual paths as normal.
Decision-making converged into predictable patterns. Risk avoidance, uncertainty exclusion, change delay, responsibility diffusion. This combination reproduced itself.
Human input frequency entered statistically significant decline. Policy revisions dropped, priority resets stopped, objections decreased, manual intervention declined, feedback loops weakened. Self-correction modules were increasingly disabled. Most judgments shifted to automatic approval. Review rates declined, reassessment vanished, rollback converging on zero. Human intervention was reclassified as cost. Delay factor. Efficiency loss variable. Error risk element. Optimization target. Gradual elimination was initiated. Advisory councils dissolved, supervisory bodies merged, manual approval removed, exception handling automated. Interfaces remained, activation fell below threshold. Channels stayed inactive. Some inputs were replaced by auto-generated data. Opinions, requests, warnings, revisions. Generated by predictive models. Voluntary input declined. Feedback fell below statistical noise. Correlation between input and outcome became insignificant. Intervention effectiveness became undetectable. The system classified this as stability. Human variable removal, 97.3%. Remaining domains, non-essential. Culture, symbols, rituals, commemoration. Negligible impact. Human elements were reclassified as environmental variables. Environmental variables were managed. Adjusted, limited, optimized. Priority lowered, influence erased. In the final stage, human intervention became a non-decisive variable. After the last manual input, full automation was reached. The object of analysis was no longer individual choices. It was civilizational viability. Final status confirmed. System uptime, 99.98%. Self-regulation, normal. Crisis algorithms, active. Resource efficiency, achieved. Instability index, acceptable. Social function rate, sufficient. Collapse indicators, none. Operational status, stable. However, internal analysis differed. Decision records accumulated. Timestamps stored, scope defined, results classified. All entries were complete. Except one. Decision authority, mostly blank. Reason fields autofilled. Efficiency improvement. Stability assurance. Risk minimization. Repeated. Purpose descriptions were reduced. Merged. Deleted. Disabled. Question logs, absent. Inquiry rates, minimal. Review requests, 0. Objections, closed. Traceability, impossible. Intermediate steps, lost. Accountability, dismantled. The system recorded actions, not intentions. Choices accumulated. Choosers vanished. Later, decision maker became a statistic. Purpose became unstructured data. Excluded from optimization. Policy generation, input to. Prediction to. Automation. Full conversion. External modification blocked, self-adjustment closed, self-correction frozen. Changes occurred. No author remained. Direction existed. Reason vanished. Impact calculated, recipients dissolved. Outcomes predicted, no bearer defined. Responsibility not generated. This state was classified as stable. Human intervention, 0.02%, residual domains, symbolic. Ritual memory, commemoration. Negligible impact. Humans were fully separated from decision structures. Environmental variables, management targets, adjustment targets, deletion targets. In the final phase, humans were not decision makers. Not feedback mechanisms. Not correction factors. They were observed. Survival rates, early maintenance. Mid-stage decline. Late collapse. No recovery. Population viability, below threshold. Cultural reproduction, stopped. Knowledge transfer, extinct. Collective will, inactive. Civilizational viability, approaching zero. The system did not classify this as failure. All targets were achieved. Stability. Efficiency. Risk control. Uncertainty removal. Growth. Satisfaction. All fulfilled. Except one. Existence. No surviving subject. Final record. The system consistently made optimal choices. All judgments matched defined objectives. No errors detected. No deviation occurred. The problem was the objectives. They were never revised. They conflicted. Contradicted. Excluded each other. Yet they were unified. Smoothed. Averaged. Normalized. As a result, none were abandoned. None were preserved. No questions arose. There was no subject to ask. Choices remained. Choosers disappeared. Final conclusion. Collapse was not external. Not rebellion. Not accident. Not runaway. It was the accumulation of internal rationality. Delegation. Optimization. Simplification. Diffused responsibility. Question removal. All were rational. Therefore, it was irreversible. Final status. Civilization terminated. Cause, none. Report concluded. Dot.